Hi, this is your host Swapnil Bharti and welcome to TFIR Newsroom. Today we have with us Banjot Chanana from Docker. You are VP of Product at Docker and you work on solutions that help enterprise customers and developers to kind of build, ship, and run any application on any infrastructure using Docker. When we look at Docker, Kubernetes, and Windows, if you look at it, these are three different words, because Docker uses a Linux container kind of setup, and then Kubernetes was totally competing with Swarm, and Windows is once again totally different word. So we'll also talk about the latest release of Kubernetes, but before we jump into that, can you tell us a bit about how did you manage to bring these three words together?
So it's been a long journey, and it's an interesting one in that if you think about where Docker started, we started with the Linux container movement, but it's been 5 years that we've been working with Microsoft on Windows containers. So it hasn't, Windows containers has just started to gain some notoriety and publicity, but it's really been a 5-year journey with Microsoft to get Windows containers to full production readiness in the enterprise. And then if you look at the adoption of Kubernetes, really just over the last 2 and 3 years, we've seen the adoption of Kubernetes. So bringing these three together, I think, is testament to the fact that when we think at Docker about how we bring a solution to market, we're thinking about the full enterprise platform. We're thinking about the developer, we're thinking about the operator, and all three of these capabilities, whether it be the container as a level of abstraction, Windows as a major operating system in the enterprise environment, or Kubernetes as really the key piece for container orchestration. I mean, it makes sense to bring all of these three together into a single platform and make it work end to end from developers all the way through to operators.
Right. How ready are Windows container for production or enterprise today?
We've been working with Microsoft over those last 5 years to ensure that the capabilities within the Windows kernel were ready to support all of the same functionality we have with Linux. So from the level of capability that we have at the operating system level, I think we're at parity now, which is great. There are additional capabilities necessary, though, and Windows applications, Windows applications are different from Linux applications. In particular, if you look at networking and storage, the way in which Windows networking works and Linux networking, they are discretely different, and so that's still work that needs to continue to happen. Both with the operating system and in the container networking world. So CNI plugins now have to be, Windows container aware. Storage similarly has a different interface into Windows containers as it does with Linux, and so there's work that continues there as well. The biggest one that's uniquely different to Windows, however, is the work that typically Windows applications integrate with an Active Directory, Windows Active Directory in their backend. And so in that model, the authentication really needs to be integrated fully with the Windows container all the way back to Active Directory. Today, that's done at a host level. And so the work we've been doing upstream in the Kubernetes project with global group managed service accounts, GMSA, that's work that's going to enable GMSA tokens to be scoped specifically to a container and not the full host. And so that work is coming into Kubernetes 1.14 as an alpha project, alpha feature, and then we'll move into beta and then full GA later on this year. So we think the confluence of all of that work, networking, storage, plus this GMSA work, will then lead to full enterprise readiness for Windows containers. But that shouldn't stop anyone today. I think developers can start the process of containerizing their Windows apps, and then the enterprise, the operator side will be ready very shortly.
Microsoft has always also been working on something called WSL, Windows Subsystem for Linux, which is also trying to bring this work. So will that also play some role, because they are bridging a lot of gaps there?
Windows Subsystem for Linux really does enable a whole set of feature set. Now, I think that work will augment this work. I don't think it will replace it necessarily.
No, it's not replacement. Yep.
Yeah. So I think it'll be a great way to be able to run Linux and Windows containers side by side.
Right.
That's going to be a fantastic value for any organization that wants to standardize their operating system base And if they're largely a Windows-oriented shop already, then being able to add Linux containers right next to their Windows containers, I think will be a fabulous benefit for them.
Yeah, it's more or less like baking in Linux without the kernel in Windows.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
So that's best of both worlds, and that's one of the reasons I have started dipping my toes in Windows again, because I'm purely Unix and Linux guy personally, whether it's managing my server and doing stuff. So now that has been great. Now let's talk about Kubernetes a bit. First of all, in the latest release 1.4, what are the things that excite you from Docker's perspective?
Yeah, so the 1.14 release actually had a lot of great features in it. In particular, things like the container storage interface (CSI) went full GA. The Windows container work, I think, was also very exciting for us, as we've been working upstream with Microsoft on that work as well. So I think from our perspective, there's a lot of great net additions to the Kubernetes platform in the 1.14 release that we were excited about, and then we surfaced in our Docker Enterprise release as well. Pod security policies is another feature that we've been anxiously awaiting. So the ability to scope pods to a specific user and to a specific role in the organization.
Right, and I think by mistake I said 1.4 instead of 1.14.
1.14, yeah.
Yeah, I'm still on my T, but yeah. Okay, if you look at Docker versus Kubernetes, Swarm was something that was doing all that job, but I think a year ago, or more than a year ago, Docker decided to also invest in or support Kubernetes as well. Yeah. And it was like Swarm will be supported for the customer for a long time. What kind of user base is there, Swarm versus Kubernetes? Do you care, or you don't care that users can choose whatever they want, or you have any roadmap for either of the two?
Yeah, for customers, it's all about the application. Mm-hmm. The orchestrator is there to serve a purpose, and that purpose is to serve their ability to deploy and manage those applications. We don't want to prescribe the orchestrator. In fact, we think that's the least interesting part of the problem to help them with. Getting their applications modernized, getting them onto the platform, that's the most important piece. I will say that in what we've found, that from a practical perspective, organizations that are new to containers, there's a lot to digest with Kubernetes. There's a lot of feature functionality there. The onboarding experience is fairly difficult still.
Right.
There's a lot of concepts to learn. And so what we do find is that helping them get onto the platform by providing Swarm as a set of capabilities that they can learn the basics of container orchestration with. Swarm is meant to be easy to use, meant to be easy to adopt. It's meant to provide some base capabilities. Swarm is not meant to be a direct comparison to Kubernetes. It never was. And so our intent there is let's help organizations get their first applications in. If they're new to containers, then putting them on Swarm helps them learn how to operationalize who's going to troubleshoot the container once it's running. Who's going to, are you going to be providing tools that do sidecar into the containers? How does your support teams manage a container environment now differently from how they manage a virtual machine environment or from a bare metal environment? And then as your applications become refactored and are ready to be cloud native and take advantage of those features of Kubernetes, then we can help you move those applications over as well. So with formats with Docker Compose now available on both Swarm and Kubernetes, that means you don't have to do a lot of re-architecture to now think about, I got to take my application and now redeploy it on Kubernetes. You can literally just redeploy using the Compose file, and now you've got a set of pods instead of individual containers or Swarm services.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Docker, container was always part of Linux kernel, but what Docker did was make it simpler and easier. Same pick any Docker product or project. That's the whole idea. And if I'm not wrong, Swarm also predates Kubernetes.
They were. I think they were established at just about the same time. It predates it inside our product, but
right, exactly. I mean, the thing is, you were already looking at the problem that were going to be solved. Kubernetes at that are. I mean, it was in a lot of companies. Till last year they were still considering. They're still not in production. So then it's actually good to see that you embraced newer technology that come up to help your customers to use. Okay, it doesn't matter. You can use whatever you want, whatever works for you. So
we're happy to make it easy to use. That's our that's really the thing.
Right.
We want to make Kubernetes simple and easy to use, and so Swarm actually provides a great on-ramp.
Right, yeah, because everybody agrees that Kubernetes is not that easy to use. And I was talking to Brent Burns also, and he said, it was not our goal to make it easier for everybody because it solved a totally different problem. It's not like you just run on your desktop and play. One thing is that what kind of update mechanism is there for Swarm? Because Kubernetes, I was talking to Brendan, and he was like, while we support all this agile model, but Kubernetes itself is like waterfall model, where you have to upgrade to the point release, and it's kind of contrary to what this whole, new development model is. So how different is Swarm from Kubernetes from that perspective? Is it the same waterfall model or it's
Yeah, Swarm does follow a standard release cadence as well. So similar to Kubernetes, it releases actually we release on a monthly basis internally. The Moby project itself doesn't have any release milestones at this point, and actually releases just nightly. So you can actually
just rolling release kind of thing.
Yeah, there's a continuous release there. Now,
I like it.
From the community side, we do want to make sure that the community knows that there are certain points in time, certain milestones where we can provide support for that release. And so we have the community editions of Docker that come out every 6 months. And they also line up with our enterprise editions as well that are provided support. We provide support on the enterprise edition for a full 24 months, while on the community edition we provide for 6 months at a time.
Right. Do you foresee that eventually it will move to the same model, move away from waterfall model?
I think we will get closer and closer to providing those nightly builds, but I don't think we can get away from providing
for enterprise customers, you do need something like that, right?
Enterprise customers absolutely need.
They want to see what went wrong here, and
and I think we're getting to the point where enterprise customers, if you can provide a simple upgrade experience, if you can provide backwards compatibility for your APIs, thought through in a thorough way, then I think they're willing to accept a much faster model. And so we're starting to see that customers are saying, I don't need to do a full 2 years around a single release. I'm willing to upgrade faster as long as I have the requisite backwards compatibility for my existing applications, for the APIs that I use, and if you can ensure me that the upgrade process is not going to bring down my environment, that there's a level of testing and methodology and approach to deploying a container platform similar to my applications. If I can do rolling upgrades, if I can do canary deployments, those things will help them ensure that they can actually take faster deployments. I don't know how fast they'll want to go. I don't know if it'll be nightly, but I think getting to monthly or quarterly, I think is entirely possible.
Yeah, you also don't want to overwhelm them with too much of maintenance itself. That actually gave me an idea of a science fiction story, because if you look at us, organic things, if we had point releases, so we can just go back, hey, I had flu last week, so I'm going back to that, snapshot before I had the flu. So, all the humans, people just, we are totally rolling release. Every morning we wake up and we have no control over previous releases.
Right. But hey, viruses evolve on a weekly basis or a daily basis, right? So at some point we might work just as fast.
Yeah. So evolution should have taken a different course.
That's right.
What kind of adoption? You already said you don't care, but what kind of adoption or interest you have seen from Docker customers when it comes to Kubernetes?
Yeah, we've seen a good adoption. Again, I think learning the concepts of Kubernetes still puts a little bit of a hurdle in the way of making it into full production. But we've seen a good third of our customers already start to deploy Kubernetes workloads right next to their Swarm workloads. And so where it makes sense, where they've got an ISV that is providing them an application as a Helm chart, where they've got specific development teams that are building cloud native applications that really need to take advantage of Kubernetes functionality. We're starting to see probably a third of our customers now are deploying into Kubernetes. I don't know quite how many are in production yet. I think that's still the next hurdle to be crossed.
Docker is also involved, not only with the Kubernetes community, but also CNCF, in the different capacities. So what is your engagement? Are you trying to make Kubernetes as simple as Docker as well? Any influence whatsoever?
Yeah, our goal is to contribute to the community. It's make sure that we are a part of that decision making process. But our focus is simplicity. We want to make it easier for developers to deploy those applications, and we might want to make it easier for them to use a full container platform. And so I think we do bring an interesting perspective to CNCF, where sometimes technologies that look really interesting and really cool are really hard to use. And if they're hard to use, you can't get the value out of them. So, what point is it in developing something really amazing if the hurdle to use it is so high that only 5 people in the world can actually figure out how to use it? So I think that is something that's a philosophy we bring to our contributions into the CNCF, even with things like Containerd. Containerd, as straightforward as it sounds, Containerd still provides really the base building blocks for how we deploy containers today. And to make that as boring but as simple as possible is hard work. And so folks like Michael Crosby or Derek McGowan, Tibor, and others from Docker who have been building out Containerd and continuing to work on it to make sure that the CRI Containerd interface is well integrated with Kubernetes, and making sure that all of that functionality is stable, rock solid. That work is hard, and we'd like to make sure that philosophy is brought to Kubernetes as well. And to the credit to the Kubernetes community, they've done a great job of taking in that philosophy, and the level of testing and QA and thoroughness around Kubernetes is fantastic. And so we're trying to make sure that we can, we will also contribute to that, but also bring that philosophy of simplicity.
Okay, before we wrap this up, what is going to be, because a lot of things have changed, things are evolving, market is changing. What is going to be Docker's focus in 2019? Because DockerCon is also coming, so you will have a lot of things to talk about there. But in general, where should we see Docker in 2019?
Yeah, so watch for some really fun announcements at DockerCon. We're going to be talking about some things actually, and bringing back some of the announcements we talked about at DockerCon in Europe. In particular, we had announced that we will be bringing forward a full development side experience with Docker for Mac and Docker for Windows, the Docker desktop products. So we're going to be bringing that to our enterprise customers now. We'll be releasing that. We have a new release of Docker Enterprise coming out shortly with the Windows container support and a whole host of other functionality. We're really focused on providing that end-to-end dev to ops experience. And so you'll see us orient even closer to bringing more of the functionality that we have today and integrating it more tightly into the development experience. So providing more visibility upstream to the developer using Docker Desktop and functionality like that, tying up into your integrated development environments, your IDEs, and tying into your supply chains and your CI workflows. So you'll see a lot more interesting announcements from us at DockerCon. We've got some great customer conversations happening. So we have 20 customers talking at DockerCon, folks like Entergy, ExxonMobil, Liberty Mutual, Quicken Loans. They're going to talk about their experiences putting Docker in production with Windows, in many cases with Windows containers. So the 2.5 years we've spent with customers on Windows containers, you're going to see come to fruition in the next announcements.
Awesome, excellent. I'm looking forward to be at DockerCon this year and all these new things that are coming up. So once again, Banjot, thanks a lot for talking to us today. And of course, we'll see you again soon.
Great. Thanks, Swapnil. Appreciate the time.